Today on Riffs, Beards, and Gear, we check out the new ControlHub mix plugin from STL Tones. Now, when it comes to guitar tones, STL is absolutely in the top shelf of revered, respected, and most widely used guitar plugins. However, today's video, we're not talking about guitar plugins. We're talking about mix aids. We're talking about mixing. We're talking about audio. We're talking about ControlHub from STL Tones. Now, before we go any further, you can consider this a sponsored video as I have got a ControlHub from STL Tones. However, all thoughts and opinions are mine. Now, the idea behind ControlHub is to take studio and artist presets and combine them into a coherent signal chain. So this is not a channel strip. This is a series of sonic modules, and actual big name producers, mix engineers, and studio houses are coming in, putting their own signature on it, and then saving those as presets for me and you to use, which, you know what, I greatly appreciate. So here is ControlHub, and I am just going to go over the general layout and how this thing operates before we actually dive in to some sonic snippets, if I may. First, you are greeted with the waveform window. Now, it can do a couple of different things, and I'm going to actually mute my output so I can talk over this thing, but I'm going to play this, and you will see the waveform react to what is incoming in the audio. But I can change this view and also go to a more like isotope-like waveform as well. I actually like the meters. I like this kind of, I don't know, I like to see the whole thing. This is nice for like if you're gonna do some mastering or something like that. However, if I wanna know what is happening on every single little frequency, this is the view you're gonna be living in. Okay, so down here in the bottom portion of ControlHub, you will see 6 different modules, and these are pre-EQ, color, compression, master EQ, effects, and a limiter. Now, the pre-EQ is self-explanatory. This is for any pre-EQ you want to do before it hits the color module and the compression module. The color module, I would say, is where a lot of the business happens as far as broad brushstroke sonic moves. We have the preamp section, and then we have the color section. And the color section is going to let you add drive, tape saturation, and tube breakup. This is best used very, very subtly, in my opinion, obviously depending on your situation. However, there's a lot happening in this module alone, and you could actually get away with just using this on a lot of stuff to really spice things up. Now, in the compressor section, we have 2 different compression modes. We have FET, which is going to be very aggressive, much more dirty and saturated. And we also have a VCA compressor, which is traditionally a very, very clean kind of compression. We have our typical controls: threshold, attack, ratio, release, makeup gain, which you can also have just let it do its thing and switch it to auto. We also have a sidechain function, an input function, and a mix knob. Love the mix knob. Next, we have a master EQ. This is going to be EQing post compression, post saturation, post color to fine tune your EQ moves. Then we go into effects, and this is where you can get stuff like reverb, delay, all the saucy effects. If you want to be a sauce boss, this is where you're going to be living as far as the effects. Right now I have it off. And then finally, we're going into a limiter. Now, the limiter has a couple of different modes: left, right, and mid side. Mix knob, again, love the mix knob. And you have a balance mode. This can be, you can set this to a very, very fast release. I am typically just leaving this right where it is from the factory. Like there's a factory. 252 milliseconds is generally okay, or a good starting point at least for my limiting expectations. But yeah, those are the modules. Now on the right hand side, we have the main meters. Now this is post the modules down here in the bottom section. So after the limiter, it then goes into this final metering section. And this way you can use this as a clean makeup gain if you'd like. Okay, so this is not affected. This does not go into the limiter. The limiter goes into this, so you can set your final EQ, level match, things like that. Now over here on the left, we have the settings folder. We have the artist packs folder, Castle Recording Studios, the Core Volume 1, Machine, Mark Lewis, and Neil Avron packs. And we also have a local library of defaults, which you can save your own presets within ControlHub right here. Okay, so you've heard the full mix example. Let's dive in to the STL ControlHub. Let's start with the guitars. Now, with the guitars, you know, this is a rectifier. This is a boosted early rectifier going on. And normally I'm carving out EQ. Normally I'm compressing a little bit and then I'm EQing again and maybe adding some saturation depending on the situation. I started off with Machines preset. This is the mix group. This is his guitar bus preset and the isolated guitars. So I'm going to start with this off and then I'm going to turn this on. So here's the naked isolated guitars. That is awesome. You can hear how woofy and how thick the isolated guitars are, which is a great sound. However, within the context of a mix, that's not necessarily what I'm going after. So what I did was I modified the preset just a little bit because again, these presets are meant to be starting points for your own workflow. This pre-EQ, I'm doing a high pass at 94 Hertz and I'm doing, you know, a low pass at about 7,400. That's all I'm doing for the pre-EQ. Then I'm coming into the color and I'm going to turn these modules off and then I'm going to slowly turn them on and let you hear what each module is doing. So the color, as you can hear, is doing the bulk of the work here. Then I'm coming in with the compression and I'm not adding a ton of volume and I'm not taking away a ton of volume. I'm using this to just level out the guitars. And then with the master EQ, I'm dipping some of the low mids at the mid range, 738. A little bit of the honkiness, the quawk-iness of the palm mutes, I'm taking out with the master EQ. That's literally all I had to do to these guitars. Sounds amazing. Okay, so now let's move on to the melodic guitars. So there's an underlying guitar melody, the second half of this song, and it's not meant to really poke out a lot. They're basically meant to be AM radio style guitars, and they sound like this. So I want to do a couple of different things with these guitars. I want to level them, I want to crush them, and I want to suck out all the low end because I have enough going on in the low end and the low mids that I don't need for the specific guitar part, okay? So I went ahead and started with the beefy rhythm guitar preset from Neil Avron, and I'm using the color, compression, and master EQ for this part. So I'm gonna turn these off and let you hear how it sounded with nothing on it. Pretty tubby, and that's not gonna cut at all. So first, I'm gonna come in with some color. Then I'm going to come in with some compression. I really want to crush this and be super aggressive. However, I'm not fully limiting it, but you'll see on the meters how much I am compressing. I'm also keeping this fairly clean. Notice I'm on the VCA setting, not the FET. Okay, so now I'm going to add the post EQ, the master EQ, and I'm going to take out a bunch of low end. I am taking it out at 986 Hertz. So I'm taking out all the low end. We don't want the low end in this particular part. That's what we want. And in context, sounds like this. Awesome. Okay, next, earlier I said I had 5 instances, but actually I have 6 instances. So I used Machine's mix group bus, bass bus preset to take care of all of the plugins I had on the bass guitar, which was about 6, if I'm honest. This took care of all of that. So let's hear this isolated bass track, and then we'll deconstruct, and we're going to talk about it. Here's how it sounds. Here's the finished product I had with the bass guitar. Sounds pretty good. I'm going to turn off the limiter. I'm going to turn off all these effects and let you hear what this sounded like without ControlHub. Sounds good. It's a good starting point. It needs some muscle. It needs some limiting and compressing, and we're going to do all of those things. So first, I'm going to come in at the pre-EQ. I believe I was dipping about 5 dB of 596. I'm taking out some mid-range. Next, I'm going to add a little bit of tape. I'm going to add a little bit of tube saturation and a little bit of drive. This is going to add some aggression. Next, I'm going to come in with the compressor to really start squashing the bass as I want it. Now notice I'm on the cleaner VCA setting, and I'm not going nuts with the compression because I know I'm going to limit when I'm all done, and I don't want to overdo it. Next, I'm going to come in with the master EQ, and I'm going to, I believe I'm taking away a little bit more mid-range. So let's turn on the master EQ. Just a little bit more carving. And then lastly, we're going to hit it with the limiter. This isn't doing a whole bunch, but this is just keeping everything in check and the transients in check from going super, super out of control in the context of the mix. There's your bass track. Next, we have our insides, or what I like to call insides. Machine calls them total insides. This is kind of, I use a hybrid version of how he mixes in my own music because it's just so effective and so flexible, I guess. But this, think of the insides as kind of the compressed, more aggressive part of a parallel mixing process. And I do a lot of pre-compression and pre-EQing in this section. This is not a final mastered sound that we're going for yet, but we are going to start affecting and doing big brush strokes on the insides, the pre-two bus, as you can think of it. So here's what this is doing right now in the context of the full mix picture. So all I'm doing is I'm adding color and I'm adding compression. I'm going to turn both of these things off. And with my color, I'm adding, again, seeing a pattern here, I'm adding a little bit of drive. I'm adding some tube saturation and some tape saturation. I'm adding a little bit of low end. I'm adding half of a dB of low end. That's not that much. And I'm not adding any top end. So I'm going to turn on the color and then I'm going to turn on the compression. Now the compression is there to kind of catch the transients, the loudest parts of the snare hits. And you'll see it duck mainly when the snare is going. Okay? We'll turn on the color. Again, the color is where all the business is happening as far as the full mix context goes. It's adding a lot of aggression, adding some top end. The saturation sounds really, really nice. And then you have the compressor coming in and catching the little bit of pokiness coming from the snare. I'm not worried about limiting yet. I'm not worrying about EQing yet. Okay? And last but not least, we come to the final boss, Mark Lewis himself. I started with a master loud punch and sheen preset and tweaked it to taste. This is where all of the finishing moves are happening within my mix. I'm going to be limiting. I'm going to be adding some even more color and saturation and tweaking the EQ just a little bit. So I'm going to turn all of these off and let you hear how this sounds without Mark's preset. Quite a difference. First, we're going to start with color. All I'm doing is adding a little bit of low mids back in at 0.8 dB. I believe this is part of Mark's preset. I didn't do that. Sounds good. And then finally, the limiter. This is where we're going to really kind of smash down and bring up the volume and bring up just the hugeness of the track with the limiter. Here we go. And that is STL ControlHub. Now, there will be more artist packs added over time, and the introductory price for STL ControlHub is $199 at the time of this shooting. I believe it's going to go up after a certain point of time, but yeah, awesome. This will replace several of your plugins, I promise. I found this to be a lot of fun, and the color module by itself, the color module honestly could be its own dedicated plugin, in my opinion. It's so good. I really, really enjoy the ControlHub. It's very cool. And this is something that would also go on my travel rig while I am going to be on tour as well. I will link down below in the description for all things STL ControlHub. And with that, you've been wonderful. I have been Fluff. Thank you so much for watching. And I'll see you next time.